And there's a lot to do, including resolving the train strike, what we're doing now, and Congress, I think, has to act to prevent it. It's not an easy call, but I think we have to do it. The economy's at risk.
That was President Biden from this morning commenting on the measure that must be taken to avoid a potentially catastrophic rail workers strike. The president attempting to strong-arm a handful of unions through congressional legislation, and a tentative agreement was reached with the unions back in September with the goal of finalizing the deal by December 9th. But now 4 unions are holding out, which prompted the president to call on Congress to intervene. To discuss, let's welcome in Joel Griffith, fellow in economic studies at the Heritage Foundation. Joel, welcome to the show. All right, before we discuss President Biden's role in this potential strike and him trying to avoid it, just explain for our viewers how we arrived at this point, because we have 8 of the 12 unions who have agreed to the proposed terms, which were set back in September, which I believe was including a massive 24% increase in pay. So why are these other 4 unions holding out?
Well, that's right. The railroad companies have actually been negotiating for 2 years with the unions to reach an agreement. And the deal that was reached in September of this year by the Presidential Emergency Board, it was a fair deal. 24% raise over 5 years, $1,000 annual stipends to railroad workers. It was a fair deal. And Congress really should step in now and enforce the terms of that agreement. It was fair. And what this potential strike really underscores is the stranglehold that unions have over our workforce. It's making it very difficult for employers to actually meet employee needs. So the bottom line of this is when you got 30% of our goods being transported by rail, if we have this railway shutdown, we estimate this will hurt families to the tune of $800 per month, families across the board, because it'll stifle the flow of goods across this country.
You know, it's interesting because we have seen President Biden in the past be such a unions guy. I mean, he campaigned on it back in 2019. I just want to play a clip of what he said.
I make no apologies. I am a union man, period. We need to reward work in this country, not just wealth.
So is he woken up to what you're saying, that the Congress does need to step in here? Or is this a way for him to kind of save face, is saying, hey, Congress is doing this, I'm calling on them to do this, but, you know, taking himself out of the equation in some ways?
Well, unfortunately, there's not an acknowledgement on his part that it's unions that are actually the bottleneck here. The railways actually agreed to the terms of the agreement in September. They are willing to abide by those terms, and it's a few of these union bosses that are refusing to actually complete their end of the bargain. And it's not just hurting the general economy. This is hurting workers as well. If you look at regular companies that aren't unionized across this country, they were able to adapt throughout the course of COVID to the demands of workers to provide more flexible schedules. And we want railway workers to be able to have more flexible schedules and be able to have paid sick leave. But when you are bound by the terms of a contract because of these union agreements where you can only negotiate these terms every 5 years, it makes it very difficult for employers, particularly railways, to actually make life better for their employees.
Okay, so we already have some progressives in Congress saying that they are not going to vote for this because they agree with the 4 unions that they need to have additional time off, time leave. So are you concerned? I mean, they're trying to get this done by next Friday. That's not a lot of time. Are you concerned because there's pushback from these progressives that it actually won't get done in Congress? They won't be able to pass this.
Yeah, these far left-wing groups are ignoring the fact that for 2 years, the railways have actually tried to complete this arrangement. And the deal that was worked out by Biden's Presidential Emergency Board, it was a fair deal, a 24% raise over 5 years. It's time to get this done. And if this deal does not go through, and if a strike occurs, families are going to be impacted. This will cost the American economy $2 billion every day. That's $800 per month per family of 4. And if you didn't like the supply chain issues that we saw during COVID, because, once again, of union issues at the ports of Los Angeles and New Jersey, you're certainly not going to like what happens this winter as trains go idle.
Okay, so Joe, talk about that, because it sounds horrific as is, but what does that do to inflation? We already have a hurting economy. This is going to impact it more, but does that rise inflation? What else does it do? What is the trickle down of this?
A railway strike will exacerbate the inflationary pressures. Inflation is caused by two prime factors. One, increasing the money supply, which we know, we've heard time and time again, we saw our money supply increase by nearly $20 trillion over the last few years. But inflation is also caused when you suppress the supply of goods and services. And that's what a railway strike would do. It would actually suppress the supply of labor, and it would suppress the supply of goods, which will result in shortages and dramatic price increases.
Wow. Well, I know everyone is hoping that Congress will be able to step in here and get something done with these 4 unions. Thanks for breaking it all down for us tonight, Joel.
Thanks for having me.